He woke up, only to be kidnapped and taken to a secret base for organ harvesting. Before he could even react, a chainsaw was slowly closing in on his stomach. Luckily, it was all just a dream. But then he glanced down at his phone and broke out in a cold sweat from the shock. The time left until the repayment deadline, there were only 28 days remaining. If he couldn't repay the debt by then, he was afraid the nightmare he just had would come true. With his back against the wall, he could only go to his father's home to see if there was anything valuable. Then, he accidentally found an insurance policy his father had taken out. If the insured died accidentally, he would receive a whopping $500 million in compensation. Moreover, the policy's beneficiary was none other than himself, the son. Seeing the staggering compensation amount, a single thought filled this dutiful son's mind: how to cause the father's accidental death. Before leaving, he also swiped his father's treasured Rolex watch. But who could he get to kill his father? He couldn't do it himself, after all. Then he thought of someone who might be up for the job. That would be Lao Zhang, his former colleague at the logistics company. This guy is ruthless and vicious. He even has a tattoo of a notorious gang on his hand. Clearly, he's a real tough customer. What's more critical is that he desperately needs money right now. As soon as I raise the money, I'll transfer it to you right away. This is the highest rated Korean suspense drama of 2025. Evil fate, patricide for insurance money, honey trap, campus crime, organ trafficking, and many other dark themes all rolled into one. The story kicks off with the explosive plot of patricide and insurance fraud, but step by step, they unraveled a truth buried for decades. Every villain's choice in the show seems completely unrelated, but in fact, they are interlinked in a chain of cause and effect, forming a perfect closed loop in the end. And the origin of it all begins with this middle-aged man, Park Jae-young. The story of him killing his father and committing insurance fraud. A while back, he approached the crime boss. He took out a 130 million won loan from a loan shark. He thought trading cryptocurrency would make him a quick fortune overnight. In the end, he was ripped off and lost his shirt. The crime boss gave him 1 month to pay back. If he failed to repay by the deadline, they would take his organs as payment for the debt. Then the crime boss dumped him on the side of the road. Park Jae-young, scared out of his wits, to save his kidney, he decided to sacrifice his own father to swindle the 500 million insurance payout. So he went to a scrapyard. Many Yanbian Koreans live here, and this Mr. Chang, who fits the profile of a hitman, also from Yanbian. So he speaks fluent Chinese. Park Jae-young gets straight to the point with Mr. Chang. If you kill someone for me, you'll get a payment of 60 million won. Then Park Jae-young laid out the plan. Every Friday evening, his father goes to church. The route he must take, there's an alley with no surveillance cameras. All you need to do is drive there and hit him with the car. Earlier, Park Jae-young had been in that alley. I got mugged by a bunch of punks, but the cops just brushed it off because the alley had no cameras. They perfunctorily closed the case. You know the drill with Korean cops. So when the time comes, the police will definitely also, because there is no surveillance footage, classify the case as a hit and run. After I pocket the 200 million won insurance payout, I will, based on the going rate in the industry, give you a 30% commission. That is 60 million. Once it's done, take the money, pack your bags, and return to China. All good. To gain Mr. Zhang's complete trust, Park Jae-young recorded the conversation about murdering his father and committing insurance fraud, and handed the recorder to him. Now we are in the same boat. Park Jae-young has shown enough sincerity. Moreover, Mr. Zhang's child is in critical condition. He desperately needs this money. After careful consideration, Zhang decided to take the deal. Wait for my good news. A few days later, the plan to kill his father was set in motion. To give himself an alibi, he, who was always stingy, not only generously treated his friends to barbecue, also, later at the nightclub, ordered two hostesses. He even left a generous tip. He also planned to take him to a nightclub. The goal was to make them remember that he himself had been there that night. After he left the nightclub, he went alone to a nearby fast food restaurant. Then he kept staring at the waitress. He kept grinning goofily at her. This way the waitress would have a deep impression of him. To cover his tracks completely, Park Jae-young went to great lengths. However, it is precisely his sharp mind that will soon entangle himself in a web of misfortune. Once everything was in place, he started watching a Lamborghini review video. Meanwhile, the father was also ready. Mr. Chang, lurking in the corner, started the car. Everything seemed to be going smoothly. Park Jae-young spent the night at the fast food restaurant. When he went to work that afternoon, he then received a phone call from the police. Unsurprisingly, the police told him to go to the morgue to claim his father's remains. At that moment, tears welled up in his eyes. The father who had toiled to bring him up had simply passed away. He rushed to the restroom and burst into loud sobs. But of course, this was all fake. A man like him, how could he possibly grieve for his father? He was merely trying to make it look real for outsiders. Just an emotional rehearsal. When he saw his father's body, he acted devastated, as if in agony. Then his legs buckled, and he crumpled to the ground. The heart-rending sobs echoed through the morgue. This moved even the veteran detective standing nearby. Such a filial person on Earth, truly rare to find. As they left the morgue, the veteran detective comforted him, saying he would definitely find the suspect and give you a proper answer. However, since there were no cameras at the scene, the suspect hasn't been identified yet. Upon hearing this, Park Jae-young felt relieved. He still put on a show of being furious. Just when he was really getting into character, the veteran detective suddenly pointed out a suspicion in the case. I don't think it's just a hit and run. Someone intentionally ran him down. Park Jae-young kept shaking his head after hearing that. Where did this extra witness come from? If Mr. Zhang gets caught, then wouldn't he be finished as well? Just then, the witness finished her statement and walked over. She and her father belonged to the same church congregation. Last night, in the alley, she saw someone deliberately reversed the car and ran over her father, killing him, and then calmly got out of the car to inspect the body. She was just about to call the police, but the other person suddenly rushed after her. She panicked and immediately fled the scene. Terrified at that moment, she didn't dare to report the incident to the police until the next day. Park Jae-young was in deep anguish at this moment. Why is this Mr. Zhang so unreliable? But then again, this should count as a hit and run, right? There is still hope of receiving compensation, he told the veteran detective in grief. His father was always a kind and gentle person. He lived his entire life by the book. How could anyone have intentionally run him over? However, the veteran detective went on to reveal a devastating clue. Victims of a normal car accident wouldn't be buried underground. Your father was found on the mountain. Someone had secretly buried him. This plunged Park Jae-young into utter despair. He could have just said Mr. Zhang committed a hit and run. Why did he bury the body? Now we're done for, aren't we? If it's deemed premeditated murder, then the insurance payout. Nobody knows when it will actually arrive. After all, there are only 20 days left until the repayment deadline. This time he genuinely cried. What did this killer, Mr. Zhang, actually do? Why is Park Jae-young's father buried on the mountain? Now, let's rewind to the day before the incident. Let's examine Park Jae-young's first mistake. Remember how he lied to Mr. Zhang, claiming that the insurance payout was 200 million. Actually, after that night, Mr. Zhang noticed the amount was off. So he went to Park Jae-young and told him, the payout for this insurance is usually 500 million. It's 30% of the industry market price. That means 150 million. This is what he deserves to be paid. Although Park Jae-young is very reluctant, it's impossible to make a last-minute swap now. He has no choice but to swallow the bitter pill. 30% of 500 million, 150 million. You'll still get it. Now you're talking. Although Mr. Zhang agreed to the deal, he still can't stop worrying. What if Park Jae-young pulls another stunt? After Mr. Zhang returns home, increasingly feel that Park Jae-young is unreliable, so it was decided to partner with a local for this deal. Even if he tries to pull some tricks, then having a local person around can also make things easier to handle. After the two met at the agreed place, this man excitedly asked how much the compensation was. At this moment, Mr. Zhang also started playing petty tricks. The moment he saw Park Jae-young, he couldn't help bursting out laughing. It turned out he and Park Jae-young were from the same village, but they had only met a few times 20 years ago. They weren't close. The following night, the plan went ahead as planned. Seeing Park Jae-young's father walk out of the church, they drove straight into him. However, they never dreamed that the badly injured old man miraculously survived. So he immediately shifted into reverse. He heartlessly rammed into the old man a second time. But when Lao Zhang got out of the car to check on him, he found the old man, in such a desperate plight, was still clinging to life. Just then, Lao Zhang suddenly he overheard the sound of someone talking on the phone in the corner. He raced toward the sound, but the person was already gone, disappearing into the distance. He realized at once that he couldn't stay there a moment longer. He immediately went back and, together with the locals, lifted the old man into the trunk. Then they sped away from the scene of the crime. In the car, Mr. Zhang smothered Park Jae-young's father to death. Then he turned to the local and said, as long as you can dispose of the body, it can still be deemed a hit-and-run case. Korean police, you know how they are. There's still hope of getting the claim money then. After careful thought, the local seemed to have come up with a perfect plan. The next day, while the outdoor streamer was live, saw a stray dog constantly digging at the ground. It was like digging for buried food. The female streamer had no intention of getting involved. She leaned in to look. In the pit, an old man's pale face was shockingly visible. The locals' perfect plan seemed less than perfect. Now, let's return to Park Jae-young's perspective. 4 days after his father was murdered, he arrived at the insurance company, tried to file a claim for that 500 million in compensation. However, as the case was quite complex, the customer service representative told him to wait in the waiting area. While awaiting insurance company, nothing happened at all, until a customer service representative received a phone call. Only then did they casually take him to the auditor's office. Little did he know that the auditor turned out to be someone he had offended before. Earlier, his father had been involved in a car accident. The at-fault driver was none other than this auditor. Originally, Park Jae-young had already reached an agreement with him. A settlement of 5 million would be enough to keep it private. But just as the auditor was about to leave, Park Jae-young caught a strong smell of alcohol from the other man. Wasn't it obvious that he had been driving drunk and hit his father? Now 5 million just didn't cut it. He immediately jacked up the compensation to 8 million. In the end, the auditor reluctantly had to pay up and accept the loss. Thinking back to all this, Park Jae-young thought to himself, I'm screwed. The case itself was already complicated, and if the inspector were to intentionally use this to make things difficult for him, he would be completely helpless. Sure enough, after reviewing the police investigation report, the inspector used the suspicion of murder for insurance fraud as a reason to refuse to pay the compensation at that point. Park Jae-young was immediately upset upon hearing that. Isn't that basically saying I killed my father for the insurance money? But the auditor just has reasonable suspicion, and all insurance companies, when faced with such cases, will wait until the matter is resolved before paying out, as to flee at any moment. With that, he turned around and left, but neither of them noticed what was happening nearby. A young police officer was observing the scene. Now, let's take a look. Park Jae-young's second mistake, that is being overly deliberate in creating an alibi. The day after Park Jae-young's father was murdered, based on his confession, the police verified his whereabouts on the night of the incident one by one. All the witnesses who were questioned saw the photo. They recognized him at a single glance. The police were uttering why either. All he knew was that this guy had been there before. So the cop decided to tail Park Jae-young, and that's when he saw it. Old Jang appeared to be blackmailing him using a tape recorder. The rookie cop, desperate to make a name for himself, risking it all, he tailed old Jang on his own. When he got to the scrapyard, the police officer caught him off guard. He stole the tape recorder old Jang had hidden inside his coat. He thought he'd finally get a promotion and a raise this time. But as he was leaving, old Jang blocked his way. At this point, old Jang mistakenly thought the man had been sent by Park Jae-young. He was already fuming with rage. After he snatched the recorder, without hesitation, he strangled him to death with his bare hands. But Jang never would have imagined that the guy turned out to be a cop. By then, Jang knew deep down that time was running out for him, so he sent Park Jae-young a photo of the dead cop. Then he called him up and threatened him. Part of his father's murder and insurance fraud sink into the sea with the body. So Park Jae-young called Jang to tell him to come to the meeting point to collect the money. When night fell, Park Jae-young rented a car. He planned to trick Lao Zhang into a secluded spot. A single hammer strike would crack his skull open. However, Park Jae-young was aware that Lao Zhang was highly skilled in combat, so he devised a clever little scheme. First, he went to the trunk to grab the cash. Then he brought the money bag back into the car, then hand it to old Jang. Then, while he is not paying attention, pick up the hammer hidden under his feet, smash his head brutally. If the plan goes smoothly, this whole process takes about a minute. Just then, old Jang arrives as expected. However, this spot is clearly not a good place for murder. Park Jae-young, using the pretext of withdrawing money, prepares to take old Jang to a familiar place. But just as they were leaving, to their surprise, that local guy also tailed them closely. How could he appear here? It turned out that old Jang had received a call from Park Jae-young. He guessed that Park might try some tricks again, so he contacted the local. He told him to wait in the shadows for a chance to act. After all, he had originally involved him in the murder for insurance fraud. That was precisely because he worried Park Jae-young would turn hostile and back out. Not long after, Park Jae-young took old Jang to an abandoned factory. Park Jae-young looks at this spot. It stirs up many memories of his youth. Now let's go back 20 years. Let's see where all the evil began. This young and handsome high school student, that is Park Jae-young. He is on a date with a female classmate. Suddenly, the lights around them go out. Just as they are about to quickly leave the place, two masked figures suddenly burst out from the shadows. Then they viciously beat Park Jae-young. The girl was then taken to a nearby abandoned factory. When she regained consciousness, the number of masked men had increased from 2 to 3. That's right, the extra person was none other than Park Jae-young. Then the three took turns sexually assaulting the girl. It seems Park Jae-young has been a pervert since childhood. He was practically in a relationship with the girl, but he had to seek thrills. This was the story of Park Jae-young. That's why he chose this perfect spot. He planned to kill old Jang there. Then he had old Jang wait in the car. He got out to get the money, to distract old Jang when the time came. He set a 1-minute alarm and put the phone in the trunk. Then he picked up the money bag from the trunk, then handed it to Lao Zhang. This instantly made Lao Zhang suspicious. The money was clearly in the trunk. Why did he bring me all the way out here? But as long as he ends up getting the money, that's all that matters. However, Lao Zhang never expected. To his surprise, the bag contained nothing but blank paper. Park Jae-young is indeed too naive. Every step is actually well designed. But taking the money bag from the trunk, anyone would be wary, right? Soon, the abandoned factory went up in flames. Firefighters arrived at the scene immediately. Once the blaze was under control, in the ruins, firefighters found one survivor still breathing. We immediately rushed him in for emergency treatment. The instant the doctor heard that name, she froze in her tracks. She was rooted to the spot. It was a name she could never forget, Park Jae-young. That name would haunt her forever. She was the very woman Park Jae-young had assaulted 20 years ago. The victim from 20 years ago, Lee Ju-yeon. That's everything for the first episode of KDrama. Actually, the night Park Jae-young's father was murdered, many more things happened, and it's all because of this local, so-called perfect cover-up plan will drag more people into this tale of entangled evil karma. He is clearly the director of a private hospital, yet he's stressed over a 4.8 million repair bill, all because he met up with an online female friend in real life last night. Though he had the desire but no nerve, had originally planned to finish the meal, then drive the girl home. But what he didn't anticipate was that she was bolder than he had imagined. Her words instantly got President Han's heart racing, even though his pregnant wife is waiting for him at home. But faced with such temptation, he still chose to rent a room with his girlfriend in the suburbs. Then he swallowed a tonic pill. He had planned that after it was over, he would drive home to be with his wife. But his girlfriend suddenly took a sip of wine. And then, after a night of intimacy, the girlfriend got a phone call. Then she frantically asked him to drive her back to the city. She said that her friend's father had suddenly passed away. She had to rush back now to be with him. But Dean Han had just been drinking. He was in no condition to drive her back. His girlfriend saw that he was completely unwilling. She simply took off her clothes and said she'd just walk back on her own. It was the middle of the night, and they were at a guest house in the middle of nowhere. It can't be helped. Dean Han had no choice but to risk driving drunk. He gritted his teeth and agreed. On the mountain road heading toward the city, Dean Han couldn't help yawning. To keep him awake, his girlfriend actually started playing a thrilling game. Then she kissed him. Driving while fatigued is dangerous. After all, it's the dead of night. How could there be anyone on the road at this hour? After Dean Han snapped out of his panic, he hurriedly rushed over, only to find that the old man had stopped breathing. As a doctor, Dean Han tried every possible life-saving measure, but there's no turning back. Seeing this, the girlfriend started to dial for help. Dean Han rushed over, grabbed her phone away. If she called the police now, he would be found guilty of killing someone while driving drunk and face legal consequences. Wouldn't his life be completely ruined? At this moment, Dean Han blamed everything, all on his girlfriend. Just as Dean Han was grumbling and swearing, a car was approaching in the distance. He was so scared that his face turned pale instantly. Then he hid the body in the ditch beside the car. He thought he could get away with it, but unexpectedly, the car backed up again. Then the other driver rolled down the window. Curiously, he asked him, "Did an accident happen?" Dean Han quickly waved his hand in refusal. He claimed the rescue car he had called would be there any minute. In the end, he managed to get rid of them. Now Dean Han was torn with indecision. If he didn't call the police, what should he do with the body? But right now, he couldn't worry about that too much. He first stuffed the body into the trunk. He would figure something out later. But his girlfriend immediately stepped forward to object. If you're planning to hide the body, doesn't that turn it from a traffic accident into premeditated murder? But since it's already come to this, what can we do? It's not like you can just go and turn yourself in. Just as the two were at a stalemate, someone nearby picked up a fallen bottle, then hastily rode away on a bike. Apparently, this person had overheard the conversation in which he told his girlfriend about hiding the body. Now Dean Han is definitely not letting him go. Dean Han immediately looked around. After making sure no one was around, he then stuffed the passerby into the trunk. At this point, Dean Han had no way out. He had no choice but to see this through. After calming down his girlfriend, he drove the car to a more secluded location, intending to bury both people from the trunk. Just then, the passerby woke up from his coma. The moment he saw the body, he was terrified and cried out for help. When Dean Han saw this, immediately grabbed a baseball bat, strode over to the trunk, and then brutally beat the passerby. "Who told you to stay up this late and come out wandering around?" Then he warned him that he had already killed someone and wouldn't mind killing another. Seeing the passerby was already frightened, Dean Han then asked the passerby for his bank account number and directly transferred 10 million yuan to him as hush money. Then he threatened him, "Now you're already an accomplice. If you dare to say anything about this, then you'll go to jail too." Dean Han is taking him for a pushover. Under these circumstances, how could he possibly be an accomplice? Then he had the passerby carry the corpse on his back, deep in the woods, and just like that, they buried the old man. Once they were back in the car, Dean Han finally breathed a sigh of relief. But the passerby suddenly asked for an arm and a leg. He's demanding another 10 million in hush money. This passerby is incredibly daring. He actually dares to blackmail a murderer in the middle of nowhere. Dean Han was tearing his hair out in anger. After careful deliberation, he deal give this man another 20 million. It's not that Dean Han is being arrogant with his wealth, but rather the situation at hand. It's better to be greedy than to have no desires at all. Otherwise, they'll call the police immediately. So is it over? Hopefully the passersby will quit while they're ahead. By the time they drove back to the city, it was already dawn. Director Han told his girlfriend to go home and get some rest. He also made a point of telling her not to contact him for a few days. After dropping his girlfriend off at home, the passerby came over to collect the 20 million from him, although Dean Han felt some regret. But now that things had come to this, he could only grit his teeth and let it go. The passerby who got the money was over the moon. When Dean Han saw the remaining balance, there was only a mere 3 million left. It was heart-wrenching for him. Before parting ways, he reconfirmed with the passerby. Seeing how genuine the stranger looked, he finally let his guard down. Back in the car, he noticed a scratch on his hand from Rito's body. The memory of this morning's ordeal came back to him. He'd lost 30 million bucks and somehow ended up a murderer. The more he thought, the more he stewed. He took it out on the steering wheel. The excruciating pain brought him back to his senses. His top priority was to destroy the evidence. He quickly pulled out the dashcam's memory card and drove the car to an auto repair shop, pretending nothing had ever happened. When he saw the 4.8 million repair estimate, his heart instantly sank. He then went back to his office at his own hospital and carefully cleaned and disinfected the wound, even though he is the hospital's director. But investing in this hospital has drained all his savings. After much thought, Director Han decided to have his girlfriend cover the repair costs. After all, it all started because of her. Eventually, his girlfriend reluctantly agreed. Back at the hospital, he thought the trouble was finally over, but just as he was changing the dressing, to his surprise, that stranger showed up at his door once more. Dean Han was utterly stunned. How on earth did he find this place? The stranger explained that yesterday in his car, he saw your hospital's business card, so he came here to find you. By then, Dean Han had a sinking feeling. He asked the stranger helplessly, "What exactly do you want? Give me another 30 million won." Us in such a tough spot. But it's all water under the bridge now. He told the stranger to give him a week. He'll transfer the money to you by then. But he insisted this was the last time. The stranger agreed without hesitation. Before leaving, he still took the time to encourage Dean Han. After that, the stranger struck up a conversation with the receptionist. And their conversation, Dean Han felt as if his heart was being stabbed by 1,000 arrows. The accident due to his own carelessness. He hit an animal on the road. But the mechanic immediately questioned that. The car's hood and windshield were both damaged. Only the front bumper was intact. If it had been a head-on collision with an animal, there's no way the bumper would have no collision marks. The mechanic's words were a real eye-opener. Before that, he was only focused on destroying the evidence. He had completely overlooked this detail. But at dawn that day, how exactly had he hit the old man? So he dashed back to his apartment complex and fished out from the trash bin the memory card from the dashcam he had discarded that morning. The dashcam's memory card. He then hurried home, carefully reviewed the footage from that night. As expected, the person had fallen from the overpass, which meant he was not the killer. Dean Han promptly explained, "As long as we keep our stories consistent when we get to the police station, we'll just insist that we were threatened by that stranger and were forced to help bury the body. The police will definitely believe me, a doctor, rather than that murderer." After thinking for a moment, the girlfriend also felt that this might work. "Let's go to the police station together. I'll help you." So they set a meeting place, intending, before going to the police station, first rehearse their prepared statements. But just as Dean Han was furiously scolding that passerby, she used to be a sweet and caring girlfriend, but now, she changed overnight. "Look at President Han, he looks totally shocked." The girlfriend continued to vent her pent-up frustrations over the past few days. She took out her Turns out these two are well-known local con artists who use the badger game trick. First, Lee Yuya, Dean Han's girlfriend, seduces married men. Once Lee Yuya checks into a hotel room with them, Mr. Jin, the passerby, will burst in and blackmail and extort them. Since the victims are all prominent figures, to avoid being found out by their wives, they generally choose to buy their way out of trouble. On the night they plan to blackmail Dean Han, Mr. Jin received a phone call. That is, the killer Mr. From the previous installment. After he took on the task of killing the man's father for insurance fraud, he then planned to team up with Mr. Jin. So that night they ran over and killed the man's father, but unfortunately, someone witnessed it. They had no choice but to lift the old man into the trunk first. In the car, Mr. Jin thought of a plan to kill two birds with one stone. He immediately called Lee Yuya at the guest house and shared his plan with her. Then Mr. Jin alone carried the old man on his back to the overpass. After receiving Lee Yuya's text message, Mr. Jin found the right moment and dropped the old man's body off the overpass. This way, they could not only dispose of the body, he could still squeeze a large sum out of Dean Han. So far, everything was going perfectly. But what old Jin never could have imagined was how unreliable this Dean Han turned out to be. He had clearly told him back then that the pit was too shallow. It would be easily spotted, but he insisted on doing it his own way, and kept insisting that the depth was enough. At this point, old Jin didn't feel like arguing, so he had no choice but to play along. At break of dawn, stray dogs dug up the soil. Then an outdoor streamer accidentally stumbled upon it. And that's the full story of what happened that morning. Now, let's go back to President Han's story. Right now, the two were figuring out what to do with him. Old Jin meant they should leave no one alive. After all, this kid knows way too much. But where should they bury him? Lee Yuyan quickly came up with a spot. The abandoned factory back in his hometown. Lee Yuyu felt a surge of emotion at this familiar sight. It was impossible not to be moved. Meanwhile, as they were digging, Dean Han regained consciousness. He saw that they had left the engine running to power the headlights. The car was still running. He stealthily slid into the driver's seat. Has a sense of risk management. If we let him off the hook tonight, no doubt he'll go straight to the cops tomorrow. In the end, Dean Han died because of his lust. As the camera slowly pans to Lee Yuxia, her dark past begins to surface. A past filled with sins begins to unfold. It turns out that 20 years ago, driven by jealousy toward her female classmate who had a sweet appearance and had been chosen as the cover model for the school anniversary brochure Lee Yuxia's jealousy was fueled by her female classmate's sweet appearance. Her classmate with a sweet face was also chosen as the cover model for the school anniversary brochure. To vent her rage, she got her senior, Park Jae-young, the man who had killed his own father, to claim claim insurance money to pursue the female classmate. To release her fury, she enlisted her senior Park Jae-young. Her senior, Park Jae-young, the very man who had killed his father for insurance money, began to pursue the female classmate. This was the man who had killed his father for insurance money to pursue this female classmate. Exactly. Surprisingly, Park Jae-young and Lee Yu-yeon were high school classmates. Then Park Jae-young took the girl to a secluded place for a date. Then he made two milk, looking at her unconscious female classmate. Then she casually said to the masked men, "Do whatever you want." Then she left the scene without looking back. Afterwards, Park Jae-young and the other two masked men took turns brutally assaulting the girl, and this time, Lee Yu-yeon chose an abandoned factory, attempting to commit another crime. But divine justice is inevitable. No one gets away forever. This ruin is the seed she herself planted. It was also an unavoidable fate she couldn't escape. However, the scene of old Jin murdering Dean Han was completely captured on camera by a mysterious figure in the distance. Captured it on camera. But who exactly could this mysterious person be? It turned out that Dean Han's pregnant wife detected that her husband might be cheating on her. Therefore, she hired a private detective. They were actually the two passersby who drove past that night. But little did they expect. I actually caught the moment Dean Han was killed on camera. They rushed back to the office. They reported to the boss what had just happened. The boss of this detective agency had previously been a detective. Upon hearing this, he immediately called the police. Thus, Mr. Jin became a wanted criminal. However, the tangled fate of this group continued. A girl just went on a date with the senior she had a crush on. Then two masked men appeared, blocked their way. Then, without a word, they brutally beat up the senior. The girl was then taken to an abandoned factory. When she woke up, the two masked men had become three. The girl fought back with all her might. But ultimately, she was brutally and repeatedly assaulted by them. Not long after, the three rapists were caught and put behind bars. But suddenly the girl saw the senior she had a crush on was also among them. She hurriedly explained to the police. The senior was also a victim. So the real mastermind behind everything turned out to be that senior. The moment the truth was revealed, the girl's world came crashing down. She was panting heavily, out of breath. 20 years later, this incident still haunted her like a relentless nightmare. Even though she had become a doctor now, she was still jolted awake by nightmares every day. But on this day, fate handed her a chance for revenge, because a burn patient was admitted to the hospital, and his name was Park Jae-young. He was also the main perpetrator, the senior who had assaulted her years ago. At that moment, Lee Ju-yeon stood frozen in place. However, she reconsidered. Maybe it was just a case of having the same name, but the name of her tormentor was right in front of her. How could she simply let it go? So she visited a private detective agency, handed the owner a large sum of money, hoping he could help investigate the three monsters who had assaulted her back then. Where were they now? And what about the detective agency owner, a seasoned veteran who retired from the criminal police team? Soon, from his former colleagues, he obtained the personal files of the three criminals. Then, he leveraged his connections. He successfully located their whereabouts. It turned out that those three criminals from years ago, two of them had already died. One of them, after committing more rapes, was bullied by cellmates and committed suicide. The other one also died from a massive drug overdose. He died at home. In the end, Park Jae-young was the only survivor. When Lee Ju-yeon got the news, she couldn't help asking him, "Is Park Jae-young in the hospital now?" Lee Ju-yeon immediately headed toward the ward. It was as if fate had come full circle. The pervert who had once assaulted her was now her patient. Lee Ju-yeon had fantasized countless times about killing him with her own hands. But the moment she was about to open the door, she lacked the courage to face him. Just as she was hesitating, the police arrived. They were about to question Park Jae-young about the fire from that night. Lee Ju-yeon had no choice but to leave first. Once the police had left the hospital, Lee Jaoyan grabbed the scalpel. She then headed to Park Jae-young's room. Yet once again, it was all in her imagination. For a good person, taking revenge and killing someone is simply too much to bear. While she was still debating whether to go through with the murder, Park Jae-young was unexpectedly discharged from the hospital ahead of schedule. When Lee Jaoyan heard the news, she rushed out after him without a second thought. But it seemed Park Jae-young didn't even remember her. This man whose face is completely unrecognizable. In fact, he is not the real Park Jae-young. The real Park Jae-young is this man here. He recently owed 130 million won in high-interest loans. If he fails to repay within 30 days, the crime boss will take his organs to settle the debt. To save his own skin, Park Jae-young decided to hire a hitman to murder his father, to swindle the 500 million won insurance payout. Though they succeeded in killing the father, the insurance payout never came through, so he couldn't pay the hitman's fee. But the hitman didn't give a damn. He bound Park Jae-young hand and foot. Tonight, it's either the money or your life. Meanwhile, the fake Park Jae-young walked over too. He is one of the killers, Mr. Jin. Since Mr. Jin had killed someone earlier, he is now wanted nationwide by the police. Now, he no longer cares about the pay. Even if he gets the money, he has nowhere to run. Just when Mr. Jin was at a loss, he saw Park Jae-young tied to a chair. He suddenly realized that Park Jae-young's looks and physique were somewhat similar to his own. Just then, in his mind, a perfect plan formed in his mind to ensure complete success. No one else must know about this plan. Then Mr. Kim took Park Jae-young's ID card. He swapped their clothes. He also took the Rolex watch. Waking up, Park Jae-young is totally baffled. Who on earth is this person before him? To let him die knowing the truth, Jin then revealed his plan. It turns out Jin wants to swap identities with Park Jae-young to avoid being caught by the police. If he burns Park Jae-young beyond recognition, the police will then mistakenly believe that the fugitive Jin is dead, thereby revoking the nationwide warrant. This way, he can take on Park Jae-young's identity. Look for a chance to sneak out of the country. After saying that, Mr. Jin grabbed a bucket of gasoline. He first poured gasoline over old Jang's corpse. Then he splashed it across every corner of the deserted factory. Then he took the remaining gasoline and dumped it all over Park Jae-young's head. Finally, Mr. Jin revealed his true identity. They were both students at Juhae High School. Mr. Jin was his senior. Upon hearing this, Park Jae-young immediately begged his senior to spare him. But Mr. Jin at this moment, how could he possibly stop? Park Jae-young shouted desperately for help, but even if he screamed his lungs out, no one would come to save him. This scene is just like the scene where he assaulted his female classmate back then. Karma finally caught up. Park Jae-young's ultimate fate. He was reduced to ashes in the flames of despair, and his innumerable crimes too great to be listed were also forever buried beneath the ruins of this factory. But Mr. Kim never expected there were actually gas canisters stored inside the factory. The flames instantly detonated it. The massive blast hurled Mr. Jin into the air. Then the falling planks pinned him to the ground. Struggle as he might, he couldn't break free. Thus, Mr. Jin was engulfed by the flames. However, firefighters arrived just in time. Mr. Jin, barely alive, cheated death. He was then rushed to the hospital for emergency care. However, after surviving the disaster, he was left completely disfigured. Also, because he had inhaled too much smoke, which damaged his vocal cords. In a sense, Mr. Jin had gotten his wish to become Park Jae-young. Later, the police came to question him about what had happened that night. Mr. Jin lied, claiming that on that night he had been kidnapped and taken to an abandoned factory, where he saw two men fighting, who seemed to be arguing over whether to kill him. Then one of the men poured gasoline on himself. At the moment the flame was lit, he saw that man's face. It seemed to be the wanted criminal, Mr. Jin. After that, he fell into a coma. He didn't know what had happened. After hearing this, the police expressed deep sympathy. However, since it was a criminal case, they needed to collect fingerprints to confirm his identity. But at this moment, both of Mr. Jin's hands were charred. Certainly, fingerprints could not be collected. The police had no other choice. The other two bodies were burned to ashes. To confirm their identities, they had to wait 15 days for the DNA comparison results. Mr. Jin managed to dodge the bullet for now. When the police left, Mr. Jin couldn't help betraying a hint of sadness. The price of becoming Park Jae-young was too high. That was everything Mr. Jin went through that night. Now, confronted by Lee Xiaoyan's questioning, Mr. Jin feared that his true identity would be revealed, so he gave her some vague answers. Mr. Jin thought, after saying these words, whether she was Piao Xiaowang's enemy or lover, they probably won't bother me anymore. But he had just gotten into the taxi. The woman chased after him again. She kept rambling on about nonsense. Mr. Jin's disdainful expression. This led Lee Xiaoyan to make up her mind, to make him die a painful death. And so it was. Although Jin had assumed Park Jae-young's identity, he still had one more enemy. Then Jin swiped his card to enter Park Jae-young's house. He had planned to find something valuable, and then flee abroad to lie low. It's the insurance company calling. The compensation of 500 million has been approved. Almost made Mr. Jin burst into laughter. Now all he needs is to get a disfigurement certificate from the police, then get a new bank card. Then won't he be able to get the 500 million? But his joy didn't last long. Then some bad news came from the other end of the line. It turned out that Park Jae-young's father, before his death, had made a separate will. All of his estate and insurance proceeds were donated to the church. Mr. Kim immediately rushed to the church to demand an explanation. He is living in such misery now. He should at least get a share. But suddenly, the detective crashed right into him. While helping Mr. Jin dust off his clothes, he patted down all his pockets until he swiped Mr. Jin's painkillers. Only then did he stop. Then he pretended to find it on the ground and handed it back to him. But that bottle of painkillers had already been replaced with a substance Li Xiaoyan had long prepared, a paralytic agent that would leave him weak in the limbs. He transferred 3 million won to the detective last night. It was all to get the other person to do this job. Shortly afterward, Mr. Kim arrived at the church. After meeting the person in charge, he started yelling at her, demanding that she hand over the compensation. Seeing that the person in charge remained unmoved, Mr. Kim then began to pour out his grievances. Look at me, the state I'm in now. I'll need a lot of money for treatment later. If my father were still with us, he would surely have covered the cost. From both a moral and logical standpoint, the person in charge had no grounds to say no. However, Mr. Jin never imagined. The person in charge produced a recording his father had prepared long before. As it turns out, Park Jae-young's father, seeking redemption for his son's sins, visited the church every week to pray, in hopes of lessening his son's guilt. Yet he also knew his son was no saint. They'll definitely come here to cause a scene over the inheritance. He even recorded a message to that effect. No matter what happens to Park Jae-young, he must not receive a single cent of this money. Mr. Kim completely broke down. What the hell did Park Jae-young do that was so outrageous? That his father would not give him a single cent. Just as Mr. Kim was at a loss for what to do, he suddenly spotted a familiar figure. It was Dr. Lee Ju-yeon. She appeared again out of nowhere. Lao Jin, who was already fuming, went up to confront her. But Lee Zhaoyan just glared at him, without saying a word. Lao Jin didn't want to waste any more time on her. Before leaving, he pulled out that bottle of pills. Gulp it all down. After walking out of the church, Mr. Jin arrived at a familiar intersection. This was the exact spot where he had struck and killed Park Jae-young's father. This alley had a notable characteristic. There were no surveillance cameras. Thinking back to that night, couldn't help but wonder if he had become this way because of a curse from Park Jae-young's father. Just as he was wryly mocking himself with a bitter smile, the true curse is closing in on him. Lee Ju-yeon tails him all the way. Waiting for the drug to kick in, she bides her time. Mr. Kim watches the woman, haunting him like a relentless specter. He's beginning to feel afraid, so he straight up tells her the truth. He is not Park Jae-young. Mr. Kim wanted to defend himself, but didn't know where to start. However, this only infuriated Lee Ji-yeon. True to form, her enemy had not changed one bit. Still the same coward who would act but not own up. Just then, the drug kicked in. Mr. Jin felt a sudden dizziness. Then he fell limp on the side of the road. Lee Zhaoyan pulled a scalpel out of her pocket. She was ready to kill her enemy with her own hands. But just as she was about to strike, her boyfriend showed up. He was Mr. Jin's attending physician. A few days earlier, he had seen at the hospital entrance. To his surprise, Lee Zhaoyan was right in the middle of the road, blocking Park Jae-young's car. So he had someone investigate what connection his girlfriend had with Park Jae-young. That's how he learned of his girlfriend's tragic past. That's why he came to tail her tonight. He just didn't want his girlfriend to throw her life away for someone like this and ruin her entire future. But faced with the nemesis who has haunted her for half her life, how could Moon ever stop? Just those words, "Let's go home." In an instant, the flames of vengeance within Lee Ju-yeon were doused. Even killing Park Jae-young wouldn't change anything, and the only thing that would be destroyed would be the happiness she could have had for the rest of her life. After a struggle that felt both fleeting and interminable, she finally set down the scalpel, and also let go of the inner demon that had tormented her. Once again, Mr. Jin had narrowly escaped disaster, but when he got back to Park Jae-young's house, and got ready to pack up and run, he happened to see the cover of a high school promotional brochure. Mr. Jin immediately became suspicious, because the cover model's name was Lee Ji-yeon. It suddenly reminded him of 20 years earlier, when he saw her at a nightclub. The younger female student was bummed that Lee Zhaoyan got chosen as the cover model. She was feeling down in the dumps. That's when Mr. Jin came up with a plan for her. He suggested getting someone to sexually assault their classmate Lee Zhaoyan. For a model student like her, destroying her reputation was the ultimate payback. So the mastermind behind the gang rape was none other than Mr. Jin. Now let's recap the whole story about the relationship among these three masterminds. Lao Jin is a senior at Juhae High School. He was the mastermind behind this case. Lao Jin's underclassman, Lee Yuya, is a freshman in high school. In other words, she had someone assault her classmate Lee Zhaoyan. Park Jae-young is a sophomore in high school. He was the one who ultimately carried out the crime. But now, two of the three masterminds are dead. Lao Jin, who now knows the truth, it finally dawned on him. No wonder Lee Ju-yeon held such a grudge against Park Jae-young. He let out a desperate laugh. Could he be the next to die? However, he wasn't about to accept his fate. The top priority was to escape this dangerous place. After that, Mr. Kim carried his luggage on his back. He arrived at the bus stop and waited for the airport bus. Meanwhile, there were only seconds left until midnight. Suddenly, Park Jae-young's phone rang. Little did Mr. Kim know the cost of turning into Park Jae-young. Not only inheriting his enemies, but also the things he was unaware of. A 200 million won loan shark debt. And this countdown app, besides reminding him of the payment due date, it also has a location tracking feature. Just then, a car came speeding towards him. Then Mr. Jin was abducted to a secret base where they harvested organs from live victims. What caught him even more off guard was that the surgeon that the mob boss had hired turned out to be the boyfriend of Dr. Lee Zhaoyan. Since her boyfriend was born into poverty, to save up for their wedding, he had to take on this perilous part-time job, and today was also his last day on the job. The mob boss saw that he was dependable and hardworking, so he gave him a parting gift, and that gift was the Rolex watch taken from Mr. Jin, the same watch that Park Jae-young had stolen from his father. It had come full circle. This Rolex turned out to be their sacrificial offering. When the boyfriend entered the operating room, he saw multiple burn marks on the person's body. He still thought it couldn't be such a coincidence. But when he lifted the hood, he saw that it was indeed Park Jae-young Mr. Kim. Mr. Jin was too clever by half. He thought that by assuming the identity of Park Jae-young, he could make a clean getaway abroad. But he had no idea that the name Park Jae-young was actually a death sentence. And this boyfriend's usual way of doing things was that after organ removal, he would try to spare their lives as much as possible. But after witnessing his girlfriend's agony last night, the boyfriend wouldn't spare him. Then he picked up the anesthetic. After a moment's hesitation, he made his decision. The next day, Lee Zhaoyan woke up from her sleep. This time, she had a particularly peaceful sleep. Her boyfriend was already waiting for her early. Then Li Xiaoyan held his hand. They arranged to go back to their hometown to see her mother. Later, Li Xiaoyan went to work at the hospital. Just then, the detective brought some files. I intended to tell her that there had been a new development in the Park Jae-young case. But in Li Juyan's mind at this moment, the name Park Jae-young no longer existed. That evening, it suddenly started to snow. The evil that once tore her apart is now covered by pure white snowflakes, like a long overdue baptism 20 years late. Now she treads lightly, pressing ahead. Snow falls on every corner of the city, symbolizing all the entanglements born of evil will eventually, in the cycle of karma, meet their final ends. Gradually, a smile spreads across Li Xiaoyan's face. That was her silent farewell to the past. That was also the beginning of her new life. This road may be very, very long,